This is another sign of the times, an analysis, and a commentary. Donald Trump is preparing for war. President Trump took limited military action against Syria after a chemical weapons attack last year, largely ignored the issue after that, and then last week surprised his military commanders by announcing plans to soon withdraw 2,000 troops in the fight against the Islamic State. Mr. Trump now says that there would be a big price to pay for the latest killings, estimated at up to 70 people dead, according to aid groups. But the president should know by now that tough talk without a coherent strategy or follow-through is dangerous. What to do next in Syria is a crucial test for Mr. Trump, who has shirked America's traditional leadership role. He has tried to seem like a macho leader who would aggressively use American power where President Barack Obama wouldn't, while talking about pulling out of the Middle East and walking away from international commitments. With such inconsistency, he will not be able to stop the violence in Syria, and with no clear, unified plan with the Western allies, he will only empower Mr. Assad. Mr. Trump needs to work with the other major powers on a broad plan that could force Mr. Assad, Russia, and Iran to end the carnage and be held accountable. The United Nations Security Council needs to recommit to the Chemical Weapons Convention's ban on such weapons, authorize experts to verify who is responsible, and create an independent investigation that could lead to a prosecution in a tribunal like the International Criminal Court. So then, to have any chance of success, any international retaliatory action must be part of a coherent diplomatic strategy for stabilizing Syria and putting a political settlement in place. Since 2011, more than 500,000 Syrians have been killed and millions of refugees have fled to neighboring countries and Europe. The conflict has allowed Russia, Iran, Turkey, and the Islamic State, now degraded by an American-led coalition, to gain a foothold in Syria. During a Security Council briefing, Nikki Haley, United States Ambassador, lamented that chemical weapons were becoming normalized and argued Russia could stop the senseless slaughter in Syria if it chose to. Only a monster targets civilians and then ensures that there are no ambulances to transfer the wounded, no hospitals to save their lives, she said, no doctors or medicine to ease their pain. In other words, weapons of mass destruction are becoming normalized for their use in war. Also, Mr. Trump's war on the truth. Many people, including many Republican lawmakers, dismissed President Trump's attacks on the Washington Post, CNN, and other news organizations as just one of those crazy, but ultimately, supposedly, harmless things he does to blow off steam. But they're wrong. So far, Mr. Trump hasn't been able to implement many of his worst proposals to undermine the press. Congress hasn't tried to change the First Amendment or pass new libel laws, for example, and journalists, including at the failing New York Times, regularly unearth new scandals in the Trump administration. But the president's statements are clearly having an effect in the United States and especially around the world, where political leaders have seen them as a green light to crack down on the press. Malaysian lawmakers have passed a law that would impose prison sentences of up to 6 years on people found to be spreading fake news, an ill-defined term that will put tremendous power in the hands of government officials to punish journalists and publishers. Mr. Trump has turned his guns on the Post, accusing it of trying to advance the business interests of Amazon. Much has been made of the accusations the president has hurled at Amazon's business practices, like its unwillingness for many years to collect state and local sales taxes. Some of these practices are indeed troubling, but don't be distracted. Mr. Trump isn't really distressed about the coffers of state and local governments, small retailers, or whether the United States Postal Service suffers losses delivering Amazon packages. He is trying to undermine the credibility of the Post because it is holding his administration to account. Such attacks on the integrity of news organizations confuse the public about what's true. Donald Trump seems to be succeeding just through the force of his daily verbal assaults and shaking trust in the press and in other institutions that are crucial to our democracy, said the director of the Ninth First Amendment Institute at Columbia University. When the president calls every piece of information he does not like fake news, he also encourages politicians in other countries who are not constrained by constitutional free speech protections or independent judiciaries to more aggressively squelch the press. They know that there will be little international condemnation of their actions because one of the most important standard bearers for a free press, the American government, is led by a man trying to discredit the free press. So, Mr. Trump is unlikely to change his ways, and his most loyal supporters will support him no matter what he does, or so it seems. It is up to everybody else, Republicans and Democrats alike, to stand up and speak out against his destructive attacks on the press and the truth. In other words, Donald Trump is a liar, and who is the father of lies. And all these are more signs of the end of times as we know them, transition days, which is a time of extraordinary changes, events, and happenings. Because it's still about what kind of world are we leaving to the future generations? And that should be a very important question to ask. Again, Revelation chapter 16, verse 8. The fourth angel poured out his bowl on the sun, and it was allowed to scorch people with fire. They were scorched by the fierce heat, and they cursed the name of God, who had power over these plagues. They did not repent and give him glory. The fifth angel poured out his bowl on the throne of the beast, and his kingdom or nation was plunged into darkness. People gnawed their tongues in anguish and cursed the God of heaven for their pain and sores. They did not repent of their deeds. The sixth angel poured out his bowl on the great river, Euphrates, and its water was dried up, to prepare the way for the kings and leaders from the east. And I saw, coming out of the mouth of the dragon, out of the mouth of the beast, out of the mouth of the false prophet, 3 unclean spirits like frogs, for they are demonic spirits performing signs, who go abroad to the kings and leaders of the whole world, to assemble them for battle on the great day of God the Almighty. Behold, I am coming like a thief. Blessed is the one who stays awake, keeping his garments on, that he may not go about naked and be seen exposed. And they assembled them at the place that in Hebrew is called Armageddon. It's time for prophecy to be fulfilled. And all these are more signs. Yes, Donald Trump is like Adolf Hitler reincarnated. Or he might as well be.